Hi everyone, I'm Nicola Telford and I'm here with Phil Keel from Hello Earth Agency, who's going to introduce himself in just a second. I'm the founder of ViewsForChange and the Impact Marketing Club. Please go and check it out. We're all about marketing as a force for good. And today we're going to be talking to Phil about advertising trends in Q4, what we should be looking at in the past and how we should plan for the future, and everything to do with e-commerce and DTC marketing. So Phil, hello. Do you want to do a bit of an intro, please?
Yes, sure. So hello everyone. Yeah, my name is Phil Keel. I am the MD at Hello Earth Agency. We are a e-com performance digital marketing agency. We're based in the UK, but we deal with brands. We work with brands all over the world. And yeah, we pretty much cover all elements of performance marketing. So, platform specific stuff across Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Google, but then also bigger picture strategy. And our primary focus is why we're on this, relevant to this call, is our primary focus is sustainable, impact, purpose driven brands. So that's where our sort of niche is, for sure.
Nice. And you will have seen oh crikey, there's a dog somewhere.
Good timing downstairs.
You would have seen as well, Steph, who's your business partner, was on our previous webinar that we did around how to become an impact brand, which I actually just remembered. And I spoke to Steph yesterday. So I suppose the best place for us to start, which would be great because you're talking about B Corp and impact and sustainability and stuff, is this sort of question that comes up again and again and again. Because you guys are a B Corp and an ethical marketing agency, but there's often a conflict between sort of saying that you're a good business and also advertising on the likes of Meta and the big media players. So I'm curious to know how you grapple with that.
Yes, good question. We're always starting with the easy ones. It's a good question and it's an important question. And I think all brands, whether or not they are, purpose driven or sustainability focused or anything like that, should be asking, where am I putting my ad spend? And is this the right place for me to be, investing that budget? Ethics, sustainability, purpose, I would recommend that you make that decision really personal. And it could be very easy to look at other brands who are much further down that journey. A really big example and sort of like right at the other end of the scale is obviously like Patagonia. They pulled their ad spend from Meta. It was called Facebook back then. But they'd gone down a journey of investing in that platform for quite a number of years before they did that. And I think that's a really good example of ethics, sustainability, that sort of question and answer being a journey. And you don't need to have and this could be seen as a cop out. You don't need to have the answer to that question today, but the importance is like thinking about that question as you build the brand. It's a compromise, or it's a conversation between reach and impact. And if you're trying to have an impact as a brand, you're going to need impressions, eyeballs, an audience, customers, and ultimately you need to go where those people are. And at the moment, they're spread across. If you're thinking digitally, they're spread across, these tech platforms, which could, have different sort of goals and ambitions to what your brand is. So, that's a bit of a non-answer, but yeah.
No, it's such a tricky one, and I think you're right in sort of saying about the bigger brands that they might have the platform now to say we're not going to work with these people because they don't align with our values, which I think is like valid and important. But once you've built that platform, then you can say that, and it's quite difficult when you're first starting out, especially if you've got really strong intentions to change how people are consuming or what they're consuming, or you've got a really strong positive impact with the product or what you're selling, and then the narrative around that. If your consumers or your audience are in that space, like how can you can't really get around it, and we're sort of in a like it is just a huge conflict for a lot of people, and I think people really struggle with it. But I think like you're right in saying that it's got to be a sort of personal choice, and you've got to, even if it's potentially a means to an end. to be able to then move away from those once you've built your brand. Yeah. All right, let's get into the like now we've dealt with that, so we can use Facebook. Great. So Q4 is here. It's actually here. We're in it now. We've been talking about it for ages, but there's been a lot going on lately. I mean, macroeconomics, like world change, and also just over the past like 3-4 years, I feel like we don't have the same ability to potentially like look back at the previous year and be able to predict what's going to happen this year based on that, whether that's because of those macroeconomic stuff or whatever other reasons things are moving so fast. So as an agency and as with your brand, where are you looking to sort of draw inspiration from, and how are you reviewing previous periods to plan for Q4 this year?
Yeah, good question. So not if we just roll it back, say like 3 or 4 years, normally what you would do as a brand is you would look at year-on-year data. You would look at Q4 last year, October, November, December last year. When did we go live with product launch or any sort of campaign, whether that's Black Friday related or not, we'll come into that. You would look at that year-on-year data and you would try and improve the metrics that you want to improve, whether that's volume, efficiency, return on ad spend, number of customers acquired, number of products delivered to a customer, if it's something like that. Whereas if you like 2019 was pretty much the last, you could call it like semi-normal year that we've had. 2020, obviously what happened there with the lockdown and the pandemic. 2021, what happened there with iOS 14 and the impact that had on all platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously this year with the we've just had another spin on the wheel of worldwide events, pretty much making any comparison irrelevant, because no year is consistent with previous. So we're definitely looking at the more recent picture, because even if you just look at like in-platform performance, what Facebook and Meta and Google were dealing with last year, Q4, was iOS 14 had just come out, and the industry had been turned upside down. Like, they've done a lot of work on the platforms this year. We're likely going to have a better Q4 from like an efficiency point of view, the ability to reach the right audience. So in that fact, we should see better performance. However, I don't think there's an audience that isn't being impacted by cost of living, and that's a global thing. That isn't just for brands in the UK. So is that going to impact performance? Probably yes. So short answer, I would look at your very recent time frame. So Q1, what did that look like? Q2, Q3, and then also make a decision around what do we want this Q4 to look like, because it isn't just about trying to scale to the moon and have that story, which for 3 years ago, Q4 was very different back then.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could literally, I could sort of imagine like a blog article of like how to approach Q4, and it'd be like, look at your Black Friday from last year, what happened and how do we improve on that? Whereas now it's like it's so far from what we can actually do, and so much changing. And even this week we've had a lot of news that's changing lots of things, so really hard to know what to do. So basically, advice is to just build on what you're seeing most recently, and just day by day keep your horizons sort of on backwards horizons shorter. Cool. Right, Black Friday. How should brands be approaching strategy to this? What should they be doing?
So it's similar to, sorry, that dog wants to come in. Let me just let the dog in. Yeah, good timing. Similar to your first question, she's going to come on air now. Similar to your first question around should we be advertising on these tech platforms? Q4 has to be a very personal decision to you as the founder, or the media buyer or the marketer, and try and run your own race. Ultimately, it's very easy to look at what other brands did last year, or whether brands have already started some sort of like Q4 Black Friday messaging. They're going to have very different objectives. You're going to have different cash flow. Then you're going to have different requirements from a stock or a target's point of view than you potentially might. And sometimes it's easy to ignore what other brands might be going through when it comes to maybe have they got investors, have they got outside targets, have they got other people breathing down their neck? You need to spend this much on the platform, you need to move this much product. This product's going out of date. We need to ship it. Those are all things that you could, if you didn't have the insight on, you could run someone else's race and ultimately not have a very good Q4. So it's got, or Black Friday even. It's got to be a very personal decision. And ultimately, one of the answers is you can exit out of that race for either a good period of time across the month of December or November, or actually just that Black Friday week, 2-week period. Your requirement isn't definite, and we have plenty of brands. I know a number of agencies that everything right now is talking about Q4. Sorry, it's talking about Black Friday, and that's not the case with Hello Earth. We have a number of brands who, like, Black Friday just won't be discussed on their online, on social media, on ads, on email. They'll still probably get a benefit during that week because consumer spending just increases conversion rate. People are probably buying for Christmas, so they'll likely get a benefit from a conversion point of view, and they won't be heavily discounting if that's what other brands are doing. So
yeah, interesting. Do you think there's a damage if people don't do it? No, there's no damage to brand if they just
you could potentially, not from a top line point of view, like gross revenue, gross number of customers, you could probably not hit the ceiling of what's possible. But then your efficiency, your return on ad spend would likely be greater because you haven't pushed past the barrier, that ceiling at which you're currently at. You're not going to be spending more during a period when CPMs, CPCs are going to be higher, and therefore you're not entering that very busy market when you don't necessarily need to. And ultimately, if a general rule of thumb, the customers that you acquire during Black Friday are probably the worst customers that you'll acquire all year. So, use that ad spend elsewhere for sure.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. But do you think, with sort of some brands are doing like anti-Black Friday campaigns, or actively they're saying like no discounts on our products for the next month, or they're doing like alternative things like we're going to donate X amount of our product for this period of time because we recognize there's more consumers consuming at this period of time. What do you think about those sorts of campaigns?
Yeah, I think it's a really good way of starting a conversation with other brands, speaking horizontally to other brands. We don't have to do what Amazon or Currys or PC World, or Asda, we don't need to know what they're doing. We can set up our own conversation. And I think it's important for brands to start a conversation like that with customers, because it shows that we do value your opinion as a customer, and you're not just a number on the profit and loss sheet. One thing that a number of brands that we've worked with have previously done is extending any sort of campaign into a much bigger period, because and basically saying during that week your inbox, your feed is going to be bombarded with ads. You might not make the best decisions when it comes to buying. You might buy a product that you don't need. Obviously, that's not very sustainable if we just overconsume. So a number of brands have previously said, we're going to extend it, give you the time. It's not going to be a 24-hour sale. We're gonna run this campaign or whatever it is for like 3 or 4 weeks, and you can make an informed decision about, do I actually need this? Is this the right thing for me? And ultimately, if all purchases were that well sort of thought about, then we'd probably be in a better position.
Yeah, and I suppose like the core sort of arguments against Black Friday, like forgetting how you approach it as a brand, is around like the urgency and pressure to consume and overconsume, which in and of itself is not an ethical practice and not a sustainable practice. And most of the brands that are positioning themselves as ethical or sustainable or impact or purpose driven will be considering that their products aren't for quick purchasing and quick turnover. So it kind of makes sense that those are the brands that are not thinking about Black Friday, or they're thinking about it differently, and they're the ones that are going to, like you said, force a conversation or force a change. And I think it comes back again to that question we started with, is if they're not then communicating that with an audience that are then bombarded by everyone else, they're not having that sort of other perspective in their mass feed of like, you've got to buy now and you've got to buy this crap that we don't need, sort of messaging. So it all kind of fits together. And I suppose we have a responsibility as marketers to make sure we're telling the right story and not just jumping on bandwagons because you get scared that you're not going to get, like, you're not going to be a part of the party.
Yeah, I do think that, especially if we think about what a brand or founder might be like, if this is their first Q4, they may have a predefined idea of what happens during Q4 and what is required to take part, and it's likely that in that position they might think, if they're not able to view conversations like this or topics, you don't need to take part. Like, it's possible that they may feel the pressure that this is what my brand must do at Q4, or else my customers are going to shop elsewhere, and actually they're probably not the customers that you want anyway.
Exactly. So let's talk a bit more about customers. You mentioned it a bit a second ago. Obviously, a lot of, like you said, brands will be considering Q4 to be like mass customer acquisition period, but the quality of those customers acquired is not necessarily high quality. So yeah, talk more about that.
Yeah, so previous Q4s and Black Fridays, there was a lot of ad spend that went into both top of funnel and retargeting. So you had this audience that you built up all throughout the year, and then you sort of like tapped into that during Q4 and got them to convert. But at the same time, you could sort of like instantly convert someone at top of funnel, who's never even heard of you. Like, this is a great bargain. You don't need it, but you could buy it if you want. And then that unfortunate customer journey happens. Nowadays, I think customers have that much choice, and the quality is that high from other brands that they're probably already made a decision about where they're going to spend their Q4 money on, ahead of Christmas. I might just be waiting for Black Friday for something that I've already thought about to come around and buy. So
yeah,
one tactic for brands could be, not going heavy on like, let's try and acquire new customers during this period, because they will likely just be impulse purchases or just looking for an offer. And it's likely that if you are operating on a customer acquisition model where you make that profit on that second or third or fourth purchase, it's likely that these people who buy during an offer are probably not going to come back and buy again. And we've got pretty good data from a number of brands that the first purchase, if that value is higher, the quality of that customer is higher, and they'll come back and buy more and more and more. If you reverse that and try and acquire customers on a very low amount with an offer, and then hope that they convert over a number of occasions for the next 12 months or whatever, then it's likely that's not going to happen. So I would just be mindful about what type of customers you want to acquire. They're usually not the best. We've got pretty good data that they're just going to purchase every Q4, and obviously your brand is for life. And those best customers that we want will be here come Q5 after Christmas. They will be here in Q1. Like, they're not going anywhere, so we can look elsewhere to acquire them.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a conversation that you have to have with yourself around what metrics are important and when, and like what you're, because we often like, right, we're going to track every single number that's important and not consider the weighting at different times of what they are. So you might have a massive spike, like you said, in customer acquisition number wise, but the value of them is less, and the value of them over time is less. And that also means, from a brand perspective, if you're, a brand that's challenging a space or doing something differently that's doing it better, then you're not getting that sort of longer term conversation started in the story of your brand. as well. So, okay, we have touched a little bit on this, or maybe this should have been right at the beginning of this whole conversation around Black Friday and how people are approaching it. But lots of brands, founders, marketers, all of that can fall into a sort of comparison piece and like the imposter syndrome of like, oh, you're seeing everyone else doing it, and it's like so hard to sit and be like, this, we've made the right decision, we're not going to go for it. What are the other reasons why? So like, just to dispel that for some founders or brands that are looking at this now and thinking like, shit, we should be doing something. What are other reasons why people might be doing Black Friday sales that aren't necessarily obvious to them, other than it being like, you know, a big push for them?
Yeah, it is usually going to be a pressure from somewhere else, and that pressure could be an outside investor, which, you know, a lot of brands will get to a certain point where they need that investment. So if you are going through that, I think it's really important that you have that conversation around our business being built from a 12-month period, and not like you know, the first 9 months are going to be small and then Q4 we're going to scale to the moon. Like,
yeah.
Think about like the business being for a full 12 months. So yeah, going back to that pressure, it's usually going to be some sort of outside investor, or it's going to be stock or overstocking, or like, you know, use by date or something like that. And if that is the case, that it is overstocking, then, and they've got a lot of stock that they need to shift, then they really need to think quite careful about the consumption of that stock. Obviously, when that was manufactured, there was a consumption there. Someone's going to buy it. There's going to be a consumption there, and that's not a very good business model to be built on. So actually, I think looking at the brands who are doing that and having a, you know, trying to think to yourself, okay, why are they doing that, is really important, because they probably don't want to do that. They're probably offering a discount. They're selling a product at a lower price. They're probably making less profit. They're probably paying more for a customer during Q4, Black Friday. So their margins so when you think about it like that, you can always start to think sorry for the brands that are doing this, because like your business can operate in a much better way by not entering that conversation or that fight that you don't necessarily need to. So I would try and almost have a bit of pride about the business and the brand when it comes to that, because the damage that can be done to your brand during Black Friday is quite big if you're sort of over discounting, or, you know, chasing the tails of other brands that are discounting.
Yeah, and like you said, like you might have those customers that are just waiting for Black Friday to come along, and then you've discounted so heavily that then they just don't think it's quite as valuable, or they, you know, the whole perception of your brand might change.
Yeah, and I don't want to.
We'll just feel sorry for everyone doing Black Friday now.
Yeah, I don't want brands to sort of think, oh, you know what, like let's check out and come back in Q1, because there are still high quality customers out there who you can reach, you know, and make a difference with it if that's what the purpose of your brand is for the next 3 months. And you can reach them by having a focus on really good creative, a really good product, a really good message, and not the normal narrative, which is we need to discount this product and offer a saving that way. Like, value isn't just monetary. Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Okay, you've kind of started to answer this, but with the Q1 piece. So let's say I'm a brand. I don't want to heavily discount my Q4, my products in Q4, Black Friday. I know that ad spend is going to be more expensive. Customers are going to be more expensive to acquire. It doesn't feel worth it. I've just decided, right, I'm done. How can I reframe this? So like, we don't want to check out, but how can I reframe it so that we continue, but we've got a plan to move forward so that we're taking advantage in Q1?
Yeah. Q4, like, the world doesn't end on Cyber Monday, or, you know, or it doesn't end at the end of 2022. Fingers crossed. Like, Q1 is here quicker than you know. We're on the 18th of October already. Like, I can't believe September went that fast. Let alone we're already past the middle of October. Like, Q1, January is going to be here before you know it. So I would start prepping, you know, creative. What's your campaign strategy going to look like for next year? That you're going to acquire really high quality customers come Q1, because people sort of have that time to like review and refresh and what's my focus for the next 12 months. And you know, if disposable funds are low, then they're going to make better decisions about where they put that spend. And if that's going to be into your brand, then you know you should sort of be proud that they've invested that funds into you. Q1, like historically, Q1 has been like really good for a number of our brands, and a lot of the time we'll have like a better Q1 than Q4, and that's because we've paired that with like really strong creative. We haven't like checked out and then come back into Q1 and started Q1 like the end of January. You know, took like the first 3 weeks off, which is a really strong mistake. And you know, if you have got new products or new activations that can happen, like Q1 is a really good time for that because it sort of sets you up for the rest of the year. And if you can win during Q1 and Q2, it's going to put you in a really strong place for like Q3, like August, which is usually quite a tough time because brands are on holiday, clients are on holiday, agencies, you know, the school holidays,
everyone's
customers,
on holiday.
Everyone's on holiday. Yeah. So like, yeah. Q1 is really important, and you can run your own race and win in Q1, whereas Q4 there's obviously a lot of competition. So I would try
and I imagine like for a lot of brands, Q4 becomes so intense and like so immediate, and so like you've got to keep on top of everything that then you're so fatigued from that piece of work that you haven't had a chance to even think to Q1. And like you said, then you're chasing your tail and you're starting halfway through, and then before you know it, it's Q2 and we're already thinking about Q4 again. So it's you gotta look after the like planning time as well.
And I said it earlier, sort of try and build a brand that wins like 12 months of the year, not just like we need to make up this revenue or this profit in Q4 because we had a tough Q1 to Q3. Like it changes the conversation if you can win elsewhere, you can sort of like back out of the party in Black Friday.
All right, let's talk about something really specific, a really recent update to Meta's ad campaigns. The Advantage Plus shopping feature. Tell us about it. Assume that we know nothing and how people can make the most of it.
Good question. Yeah, so if anyone follows me or anyone else on LinkedIn that's actively sort of like spending budget on Facebook and Instagram, then you may have seen us talking about this buzzword called Advantage Plus shopping, and it sounds fancy. It is quite fancy. Usually when the platforms sort of like bring out a tool like this, you know, there's a bit of like skepticism, sort of like, oh, they just want us to spend money elsewhere, and you know, it's just them basically taking away control from us marketers, and I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing. Whereas like this is probably like the first time in like 3 years where a platform has brought something out like this, and
it's useful.
It's very useful. I was trying to think like, yes, it is very useful. It reduces the amount of time that we can spend on the campaign setup, so we can put that time into the bit which actually like touches the customer, like the creative and the product and the offer and the message. It actually drives better performance. So, you know, if it's a lower cost per purchase, a higher return on ad spend, which could actually mean that you invest less in the platform. Which, you know, if you're trying to go back to that first question around, you know, what's my budget that goes into these tech platforms, like something like this could actually mean that you start to spend less to acquire the same number of customers. So yeah, 2 big thumbs up for Advantage Plus shopping. It is being rolled out across accounts. It started in September. A lot of accounts do have it now, but we definitely have some ad accounts which don't have it yet. And it's basically, if you're familiar with Google and their Performance Max campaign type, which came out like over the last 12 months, it's basically sort of like one campaign type, which you put all of your creative in, all of your images and your videos, and it doesn't necessarily matter what format, whether it's Instagram stories or Facebook feed or Instagram feed, you put it all together, and then they've basically removed the the tool to target someone. So whether that's interests or broad targeting or lookalike, they've actually sort of like removed that, which initially normally we would say like we don't need that. We know how to target our customers.
Yeah.
So they've done that. So the focus is on the creative, and this is probably what they've been working on since iOS 14 came out last year, where a lot of the data didn't get into the ad account anymore. People could opt out of tracking, which is good. You know, privacy is good. Obviously, that impacted the platforms, and this is them. This is Facebook and Instagram now saying, this is how you need to run the campaigns and audiences in your account, and you just need to give us the best creative possible, and we'll go away and find the right customer. And it does really work. I put a video on my LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about how we build out those campaigns. So that's a good starting point if you want to know what it looks like on the inside. But it basically changes the conversation from how do we reach these people to once we've reached them, what do we want to show them?
Yeah,
which is obviously the most important part.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think a lot of people compromise on like quality of content and copy and all those sorts of things for the sake of just getting something out there. And I think that's so important. So, okay, cool. So everyone should try that out if they're spending money with Meta. And also you should follow Phil on Twitter because he's always talking about this sort of stuff. So, okay, let's round off. It's been quicker than I thought it was going to be. So efficient. Well done us. To round off, where would you recommend brands focus their efforts? Like give some, share some advice, some recommendations from your perspective.
Good question. So that dog wants to go out again. Let me just before I start waffling. So as a starting point, you really need to understand and have a think about what you want your marketing spend versus revenue ratio to look like, and at what point of the journey are you on? Are you on like a high growth, so therefore you could afford a lower return on ad spend? Are you already at a plateau, so you know we're going to pull back spend and be more profitable? Like that is a big conversation that's happened this year. Likely because we obviously had that like pandemic hangover, iOS 14 hit, and then people haven't had that much money to spend this year. So brands are a lot more thinking about efficiency over scaling. So that's a really good starting point. And then when we are talking about like social media advertising, the best sort of mindset to get into is what do I want the rhythm of our activity to look like? And that usually comes down to how many new creatives do I want to launch each week? And if you can try and build a rhythm into we're going to launch this many new creatives each week and try and stick to it and try and build out a habit that way, that sort of removes the ebb and flow of, performance is down, we need new creative, then performance actually gets worse because you've launched new creative that isn't necessarily working yet. And then you never sort of get into that evergreen position where you can either scale or reap the rewards of really good creative. So I would try and think about what do I want the habits to look like from a strategy, a new creative point of view. And then once you've built that habit, you can spend a lot of your time actually on like improving the quality of the conversation that you're having with the customer. Because if your processes are in place, then you don't need to worry about why haven't we launched any creative this month. You can actually just think about how do we actually improve that conversation.
I think that's pretty good advice, like across the board, because it's that sort of like foundational optimization piece rather than the like, let's reinvent the wheel every 5 minutes. And I see that, I mean, in my world and across like startups and all that sort of stuff, there's a real need to be doing something new all the time. And actually like you need to build that sort of momentum. And I think the way that you do that is through ritual and through process and through having like building blocks, understanding what's working and understanding what's not, and optimizing based on that. And then you can grow, or you then get into a position where you can pull levers rather than being like, I've got to reinvent my value proposition and my entire like business and change everything. And like you said, with the conversation with consumers, you have that consistency piece that's coming from that, and it's little tweaks rather than seismic shifts in everything. So
yeah, I'm starting to realize now that actually what underpins everything that we do is constantly being in a compromise between incremental improvements on what we're already doing, or like a big change in direction. And at some point, likely both of those things will be the right thing to do, but not one of them constantly. Not both of them at the same time, and actually being able to sort of like zoom out, look at the performance or activity over a bigger period of time, and then making an informed decision on like your data, your objectives. And it's a difficult personal position to be in, because you constantly need to be both very confident in your skills and your decisions, but then also confident enough to sort of say, we need to do something else and change your mind. And that ebb and flow between both of those two things are probably the most difficult.
But they inform each other, right? So like if you're doing that sort of ritual based incremental change, and you're being honest with yourself in that process about what's working and what's not, then you get to the point where you're like, you've got the insight to say, okay, we need this other bit, which is like a real big shift. And then it allows you to plan. You're learning from that other piece into the bigger piece. I mean, we're going through a bit of a process like this at the moment for ourselves, and it's been incremental, and then we've learned that actually we need to do like a bit of a shift, but we've used the basis of all the stuff that we've learned from the iterations to inform that. And otherwise you're just making like massive assumptions, and that's the problem. I think you're making if you're doing big changes all the time, to be honest, you just go completely mad as well, because you just don't know what you're doing. So yeah. Okay, do you want to shout out any brands or anyone that you're working with, or anyone?
Yeah. I think we're really privileged. We work with some really cool brands. Like we
really do. It's actually so annoying.
It's funny
I'm
when
waiting
you're like
for the discount codes.
Yeah, they are important. When you're like a young 18-year-old, 19-year-old marketer, you're like, oh, I'd love to work on some cool brands. And then when it actually happens, you don't sort of realize. So check us out on Instagram. We've got some good examples on there of some of like the cool brands. So
nice.
Yeah, whether that's sustainable footwear, really cool bikes from Bristol, really cool food and drink products. Yeah, there's a lot of cool
you guys have
stuff.
got like, I sometimes wonder like how you do your biz dev, because I'm like, how have you got these like such a good roster of brands that you're working with? So very cool.
Yeah, so we have
like
got, we
a
have
lot of
got
them
a bit...
are on my list of things I want to buy. I'm like, how is this possible? It's like you've taken my list and you've gone and got them as clients. Amazing.
Yeah, we do have like a measure of sustainability or impact that we go through for all new brands. But first of all, it's how cool are they? And if they're not cool, unfortunately, I mean, no, that's a joke. But yeah.
No, but you're right. Like, and also you're going to be excited about the brands you're working with, right? As an agency, it's no fun if you're not like into what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And I know some of the brands that you are working with are definitely on my list of things I'm already asking for Christmas. So if they are doing Black Friday, I'll send them the links. Send my family the links.
Yeah, we'll do that.
If they're not, I have considered them for a while, so it's not an impulse purchase. All right, brilliant. Thanks so much, Phil. Yeah, great to have you here, and I'm actually speaking to you tomorrow again. So, and while we're here, actually, just quickly, if anyone is also working at an agency, I've got a survey out at the moment to do some interesting research into the state of impact and sustainability at marketing agencies at the moment. So fill it in. But yeah, thanks very much, Phil, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Nick.
Cheers.